welcome to another episode of Piping Talks. This time we have a piper again, an American piper, Matthew Welch from I think California. We'll dive into that. But Matthew and I played in New York Metro for a year or two. Right when I moved to New York, he was the pipe major of New York Metro for a few years. Super talented musician, has a band on the side that does super experimental sort of music around bagpipes. So I'm excited to talk more about it with Matt. But yeah, Matt, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing quite well, Blair, and thanks for having me here.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, you were right about California. It's not that sunny right now, but yeah, I'm out in San Francisco.
You made the move a few years ago, right?
Yeah, about 5 years ago, had a kid, decided to move to the San Francisco Bay Area, and just my wife has her family out here, so we just kind of
Got it.
A little experimental move here. So.
Yeah, why not? Where it's so funny. So I did mention, but when I first moved to New York, I joined New York Metro Pipe Band, and you were the pipe major at the time. Is that where you're from, New York?
No, I'm originally from Massachusetts, and my parents were in the Navy, so kind of moved around a bit. And when I would have to say I started piping in Florida when I was living down there. So kind of came from all over, but kind of identify as, being from the Northeast, Massachusetts. And New York was just where I chose to move as just like had the best of everything, like best of classical music, best of jazz, best of popular music or rock scene, and like indie rock, and there was a lot of piping going on, so it kind of seemed like a natural place.
Natural.
Yeah.
Nice. So, what's bagpipe in the first place? Anyone in your family that was involved in the band or playing the bagpipes, or?
No, it was kind of. I actually just saw a piper come to a school assembly, and just got really interested. I was very interested in music in general, and for some reason that instrument, it just, it makes a statement. So,
I know.
So I had tried. I think I was interested in reedy sounds to start with, and still am. So I play saxophone also, and I spent time learning accordion as well before actually taking the dive into bagpipes.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny how I had no idea. Most of the guests that I've talked to, there's like, well, my grandparents were playing it, or someone in my family was playing it, but you was just at school, and piper came, and funny now that it's your job, like you're a professional musician, and we'll dive more into it. But see the kind of the story and how it started. It's quite interesting. What's so you went all over, you started the bagpipe, and when is it that you really said, I'm going to go full on with playing the bagpipes and being a musician? What was it, a moment?
Yeah, I think, like I was going off to college, and I had a little trouble figuring out what the major was going to be. But I was clear about going to a school that had bagpipes because by that point,
that was the one thing.
that was the thing. So it was clear to me that that I wanted to, that this was really important to me to continue to play, and I chose good schools that had a bagpipe band attached, but maybe not necessarily the best bagpipe band, and I think after a year of that, I went to McAllister College for 1 year. Pretty good band, we were in grade 4, good program there, great program there. Mike Breidenbach, a guy that I went to school with, is still teaching there. I had just decided that I wanted to go full on with music. I was a chemistry major at McAllister, and I just wanted to do this 180, and I had a lot of school credits from high school that I couldn't use at McAllister, but I could use that in other schools. So I decided to then, like, my real dream then was to go play with SFU and to study with Jack Lee. as very early on in my more rural piping days, I got a copy of the Silver Anniversary Tribute and just thought that that
Wow.
was, hey, those are the most incredible sounding bagpipes out there. I need to go do that. And hey, they're right there in Canada. So that was kind of, my international adventure didn't have to be that far away. And,
Hmm.
also, when you're dealing with parents and, they have to be happy with certain things. So uh, I then just decided to transfer out to SFU, Simon Fraser University, in Burnaby, BC, the Vancouver area. And I also was at that point decided on doing music major as well, that I wanted to be a composer. I wanted to be someone that lived and breathed music all the time. And it's cool because in the SFU Pipe Band, and you're young, when you're in a grade one band, that's kind of what your lifestyle is like, living and breathing the
Hmm.
bagpipes all the time and the drums. You're always hanging out with the same people, uh, you know, going out to pubs together, talking about the tunes after practice, that stuff. So
It was the perfect environment,
it
right?
totally
You
was.
you would say it's the
It was
perfect.
it was it was
Yeah.
awesome. It was the perfect environment, and academically, the school was not a traditional music program, so they respected the fact that while I was getting a scholarship for the piping, um, for being involved in the pipe band, they respected the fact that the piping was going on at a high level. But they had a very open program, and I was studying experimental music composition at the same time. So I was kind of living two lives there, two very deep, entrenched music lives. So I was just
But it was all
all
about
about music
music,
all the
right?
time.
Which is what you
Yeah,
wanted. So it was all about
absolutely,
music. Yeah.
absolutely. It's hard enough for me to get enough. I just love it.
But
So
you were pretty good, right? Like if you were already pretty good. If you got a scholarship, you played with the band. How was it? Like you reached out to the band first, or did you join the school first and you presented a piece of bagpipe? Like how did that happen?
yeah, I was able to because of my international baccalaureate school, high school experience. I was able to
Hmm.
immediately get accepted to SFU, academically, and then through Rob,
The school,
yeah,
yeah.
through Rob McNeil, who was still, bless him, he was still managing that band in a lot of ways. He was kind of integral to, he reached out and he returned the phone calls and said, yeah, you're the one that you can stretch out your degree if you want and have the scholarship pay for more if you just take the bare minimum amount of
Oh
class.
wow.
So Rob McNeil, like the band was really it was funny because I was watching the Andrea Boyd episode and how Terry really took her in. The
Hmm.
band was very receptive in recruiting and kind of setting up someone to come in academically, which was necessary for me as an American. I didn't have
Right.
national status in Canada, so I had to have some sort of thing to get me there for an extended period of time. And half of that time I was
How many years?
uh,
How many
I
years
did
was
a
it
I did a
you stayed
full
there?
4 years out there, the degree, and I did 2 additional piping seasons out there. So I had like six piping seasons, well, maybe six and a half, a shoulder of one. So I got
Nice.
into the school and had agreed to come out to the band, and then they won their first Worlds. So it was like, oh, there's no there's no need to make another decision about this. So I knew I was doing the right thing, and I studied with Jack for all of those years over at his house frequently. It was good stories. I helped build his house. It was a real Karate Kid method. Helped dig,
Nice.
you know,
Nice. So
yeah,
so you were doing the academic part at the school. It was full on music, and then you would get lessons on the side with Jack, and then and Terry, and then you would play with the band all summer. So you would stay all year long
yeah. I stayed all year
in
long,
Vancouver,
and for a
basically.
while I was pipe major of their grade two band and playing with the grade one band for concerts and stuff as I was transitioning into
Wow.
because when they won in '95, they were not exactly full of open positions. So took a little bit of time to work up the ranks, and I was super raw. I was just like, I'm all music, but just uh, I was at Jack's. It
Was it a big step
was a big
up?
step up.
Were you intimidated? Like, how was it the first practice? Like, you walk in and you're like, I listened to the CD and the album like years ago. Like,
Yeah.
wow, this is a dream come true.
Oh,
How was it?
I was scared for 2 years at least. Like I had gone from essentially like a good grade 4 band to trying to make the best grade 1 band in the world. Um, so yeah, like, and they had formed a grade 2 band right at the same time, so I was in that, but was clearly like had time, and I was going to all of the grade 1 practices, learned all their music, played in all of their regular engagements, not necessarily competitions. So concerts and all that stuff. Anyway, and then
Hmm.
all that while doing solos with Jack Lee. I was nuts. I don't know how I did it all. But
Thinking back, you're like, it's crazy.
well, fortunately the bagpipe only has 9 notes. It kind of made some things easier. So as I was learning other music, it kind of made comprehending the bagpipe a little bit easier. It didn't make it any
Right.
easier to play, but in terms of like thinking and learning the music and thinking about how it's structured and stuff like that became a lot easier. Yeah.
Hmm. What's your favorite memory? A trip to the worlds, or even playing a specific like tune or medley. Like,
Probably
do you have one?
1999 SFU Worlds, because that's the
The
first Worlds
trip,
I
the whole
won.
thing.
I had a couple of warm up trips, and yeah, we were a real package that year. We had done another trip to Ayr for the Scottish Championship that year, and had gotten second, and so we were really on a good campaign. And so that year was that. I mean, it was particularly special for me. It's a year that I graduated from Simon Fraser University with the. Finally, I'd kind of like pulled it together. Like, yes, oh no, I have a music degree now, and I want to be a composer. I had gotten into a graduate program in Connecticut called Wesleyan University. I have a butterfly at my window. I like birds, by the way. Um, so I was. It was like a great year, and then winning the worlds just before going off to graduate school was really awesome. So that medley
Nice.
was
That's a good
pretty good.
memory.
It was a really good medley. I remember having contributed the slow air that year. It could come from my
Nice.
yeah,
That's a
very
good
good memory.
memory. Yeah.
I also had like made the finals and the knockouts that year in the uh, like second year in professionals, and made it to the finals and knockouts. Excellent year, 99. Party like it's 99.
Nice.
Yep,
Good year.
all
Good
downhill.
year. And so what happened after that? So you do have a band. I want to talk about it because it's such it's unique. I mean, the music that you guys produce is unique. Was it after? So you graduated. You played with the band. What happened after that? You moved to New York
Well,
right
I went
away,
to
or?
Connecticut to Wesleyan University and did my master's degree in experimental music composition, and that was it was a great kind of drop before New York. Like um, there was kind of a little bit of a trail from that school into New York's downtown music scene, experimental and
Got
jazz,
it.
like free jazz music scene. So at the same time, people in the Saffron United band, a grade 2 band out in Long Island, had reached out as well. So I moved into New York after graduate school in composition to live the life of a composer and also do the same thing that I had always done, which was had this double life. Living the pipe band and was teaching, living that pipe band life, was teaching a grade 2 and grade 4 band out in Long Island and several bands in Connecticut, several solos. I had a great studio for a while prior to the days of Zoom and Skype. So when people wanted in-person lessons,
in
Yeah.
person,
Well,
you know?
I lost. It's great. I mean, if you could study with the people that I studied with, why not? So I understand how that
Yeah.
all worked out, and I also shifted away from piping several times. So when I made it to New York, I had firmly also gotten entrenched in what's called the Balinese gamelan, or Indonesian percussion music. That a scene of that, and had been traveling to Indonesia, and I know it's kind of mind-boggling.
This is
But
amazing.
so when I came back from there in 2002, I decided to put together my own ensemble where I could play pipes, but it was like a rock band slash contemporary music ensemble slash Miles Davis esque jazz fusion band, and where I could throw in all of my ideas and have specialized performers to play along with me, and I called it Blarvuster. We're still going after 20 years. 2002, we just played Piping live in Glasgow, which is a huge
Awesome.
milestone for me personally. Like, it was very avant-garde 20 years ago, and now we've made it into Piping live. I guess,
Took
yeah.
20 years.
So it's. I think what we did is still really fresh, still at this point. But uh, that band has been a vehicle for me to be a performer of various trainings, and to also perform myself and do things that I've written. Like I can perform my bagpipe music and compose out other lines for the bass and guitar and drums, and then have.
So you composed all the music, and you have, how many are you? Three, four in the band?
Right now we're doing a trio, but the band has been. I guess the essential principle is that it's a trio. That I play the melody, and that there's a
The pipes.
bass,
Yeah.
and that there's a drum part. So I'll compose all of that, and then sometimes orchestrate further out from that idea, maybe six, um, and so then there'll be four or five parts. So a lot of counterpoint. But some of that music stems from the melody, like a hornpipe that I wrote. And it'll be kind of a funky hornpipe, and then I'll compose out all these other parts. So, anyway, we're
Interesting.
still operating, and now it's a trio because it's a little bit easier to travel internationally as a trio, just because carbon profile, COVID. Someone gets COVID,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
gone. That type of thing. So.
yeah. What's the so you compose a lot, obviously, and I like that you're saying, it started with a hornpipe that you wrote, and then it kind of like deviated into something else. Like, how much is written down on the music that you guys are playing, and how much is improvisation with the bagpipes as you
It
perform?
depends on the actual piece. Some of them are fully notated out, and even the drum parts. Uh, I expect that people will not so much in a classical way, like realize the part like perfectly. They'll add their own flavor, and this is something that I
Hmm.
always try to balance the ideas of the kind of the spontaneous things that can happen in Celtic music, like in sessions and where someone plays
Yeah.
something slightly different at the same time as someone else, or someone ornaments the second pass of something differently. I kind of leave stuff like that open, but more or less the notes and the rhythms are firm. And certain pieces, there are uh, intended areas where the the music opens up and the form opens up, and there's a lot of long solos and improvised textures and stuff like that. So like I did, like I will
What's
eventually.
your inspiration? It's crazy. Like, what's the inspiration behind the sort of the tune? It could go from everywhere, I imagine,
Yeah.
but to you.
Um, the inspiration for me, I think a lot of it comes from minimalism, that type of music, the music of Philip Glass, Terry Riley, Steve Reich. Um,
Mhm.
it kind of comes from experimental classical music, a different way of thinking about the form and purpose of music, and I find a lot of that also is for me influenced by the experience of playing Balinese music that it can be long form and theatrical, and certain things can be worked out, but also certain things can change while you're playing it. And also the idea that happens quite regularly in jazz and improvised music circles. Sometimes I would perform as a saxophonist in a completely improvised setting. This wouldn't be something that I would normally organize, but say someone would be like, "Hey, we're doing a show down at this jazz club. It's going to be a free jazz improv. Bring your two saxophones." And it's like, "Hey, what are we playing?" We don't know. Whatever happens. And there are people that are quite adept at this, and so people that learn how to. Bach was actually really good at this. The McCrimmons were good at this. They were good at just coming up with the stuff. Other people have to write it down. Mozart's piano concertos. A lot of them have the ones that he played. A lot of them have unwritten parts for the piano. But all the other parts are written out. So there's kind of this idea that
Interesting.
The structure in music kind of comes from an idea of musical language, and we don't write down everything that we say. But it's still,
Right.
there's a comprehensibility there. So, like in jazz, you use certain, in conventional jazz, you use like the same harmony progressions that are in the melody as a way of kind of keeping the whole thing together. In free jazz, there are other things like motives or rhythms or developing a sound together or just mimicking each other, can create something interesting.
Right,
So
right, right.
there's a lot going on in the Blarvuster music, and but I would say generally the idea that allows it to happen is kind of an experimental idea that stems from a lot of American versions of classical music. John Cage, people probably heard of John Cage, Philip Glass. Philip Glass is kind of regular now because it's like in a lot of movies. But I think there's an idea about. Well, you're from Europe, so Europe has a tradition of classical music that had real purposes like court music for royalty and stuff like that before it became about like public orchestra stuff. Here we don't really have so much of that, but the experimental musical tradition, even tying into electronica and stuff like that, kind of comes from the transcendental idea of like Henry David Thoreau and this kind of idea of the American landscape. There's a lot of theories about it, but that the structure of American experimental music is very different than older European classical music. It tells different stories, or maybe it doesn't tell a story. It just presents a space or a landscape for someone to walk through.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of an experience.
It's fascinating because pipe band music, it's quite not rigid, but it has rules, and when you think about pipe bands, for example, you have MSRs and medleys pretty in sort of a box, and most people will play the tune that they have in front of them or the tune that they have memorized, and there's not so much room for experimentation based. It's it you know The UK is very conservative. It's very by the book, and it always been like that. In pipe bands, it's been doing the same thing for many many years. And there's part of you that does that, but there's part of you that does quite the opposite with the same instrument, right? You're all about the experimentation, so it's almost, you start by saying I have two personalities or I was living two lives. That's the sort of the rigid approach to teaching an instrument on bagpipes and then playing in the band, but also this band that you're describing, which is sure there are notes and it's written down, but it's also, well, we'll see how it goes, and it could be very experimental, right? So is it difficult, like, for you to switch between the two, or you feel that that's your personality?
It's more difficult for my hands than my mind. So to
like when you would go to band, like I'm thinking New York Metro, you would go to band practice, and you had a set number tunes to play, but then on a weekend you will be doing improvisation with
Right,
your
right.
band, right? So it's almost like switching the brain a
Yeah,
little bit.
I find that what I had to be aware of is that, and I've kind of gotten used to this from traveling and being involved in different, even far flung music cultures, is that the priorities of the social situation are different every time. So in the pipe band, a lot of times people are unable to do what is simply asked of them without a lot of direction. And uh, and it takes a lot of direction to get the intricacies of that type of music tight, and also if they're
Hmm.
expecting to get somewhere competitively, and they're paying you, and you're like, well, okay, you want a result, here's a result. When it comes to working with other professional musicians, that you expect them to generate their own ideas and improvisations and stuff like that. The social situation's a lot different. There's
Interesting.
the leadership roles are a lot different. What's expected of the leader, what's expected of the rhythm section. It's like, no, well, the rhythm section will take care of certain ideas of timing. It's like, finally the drummers get the lead, so that's somebody stomping their foot. And in so, but also as a composer, I become a little bit more grateful to appreciative of the people that are involved. When it comes to people that want you to tell them how to play something, and then make them continually remind them how to play it over and over and over again. Things are different. So,
Yeah.
it
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
so
totally.
it's
Yeah.
it's not. And so also, just to add a secondary part to it, I want to continually think of past, present, and future all the time, and not necessarily one of them having a particular sound. That maybe the future of the pipe band world is, maybe we go lower in pitch, maybe what we're doing in piping is actually really contemporary compared to some of my 1960s jazz ideas. Um,
Hmm.
I'm thinking about this flux a lot, and that wherever anything seems to be certain, it becomes uncertain later on with further examination.
Yeah.
So you
Interesting.
looking at yeah, like, how are we doing with piping? It seems really slow to me compared to where
Is
it was a
that
long time ago.
compared to? Yeah,
The
you feel
fast
like
the
it's in terms of music, like in terms of like the tunes that is being played, or the presentation of the band
Yeah, I
itself.
feel
Like
like
what's
uh, the approach to the Highland idiom is much slower than it used to be. You listen to historical recordings. It's kind of hard
interesting?
to always time historical recordings, because you don't know if the playback speed is always entirely accurate. But generally, like, you listen to even bands, like bands that won worlds in the 1970s. Well, the Strasbourg reel playing is like, well, like, really fast. Solo playing used to have a little bit more variety on first and second passes of repeats. Interesting stuff. Where have we lost?
That you feel were lost? Things that got lost?
Some things got lost, but then some things you can do. Like when I tried that Donald McLeod medley with Metro, you never would have been able to do that in the 1970s. So.
It's funny. Was my next question. I talked to Shane and Michael Mahoney, who Michael is pipe manager of the band. Shane is a piper in the band, and I was like, they always, every time we go out for drinks or stuff like that, and we talk pipe bands, although they don't really like to talk pipe bands, but I love it. So I bring it up, and they're always like that medley that you put together for New York Metro. They always bring it back. So it has it was unique, and it had an impact on these people that were part of the band. What year
Mm.
was it? Like, what's the story behind it, and why do you say it was not possible to have done that like 2 years ago?
Well, there were certain. Okay, well, generally the idea of a medley was never to present anything by a singular composer, but to show a breadth. And the funny thing is to frame this, I didn't even think it was the most radical thing ever, because I know that Michael Gray has done other more, as he would say, straight cuts of cloth. Like something composed from the beginning to end. That is one piece of music. So in that way, it's still a medley, but it was just Donald McLeod, and I thought that, like, you can't go wrong with Donald McLeod, like, with the most. And for me, like, those tunes that were selected had some of the most really, like, universally appealing but interesting, almost geometric little phrases. Pieces, tunes built out of little fragments of music, and like tuning, Donald McClellan's tuning phrase. Anyway, that no, wait, we did the Hens March in that one. So anyway, I always go back to Donald McCloud. I think he's the most.
Is it someone that
Oh
inspired you,
yeah, yeah. I think
why
Donald
him?
McCloud
Yeah.
was like really, for me, represented the composer. The composer goes beyond the performer in piping. He's not always known as a great, prize winner, but what's the lasting impact? Uh, the music that you leave behind. And I just was
Yeah.
always into that music. I just thought it was a composer's music. You could see the idea. You could see the ideas unraveling in the music, and there was a lot of really clever design to it. So I wanted to bring that out, and also to show how a lot of that stuff could stay the same, even with the variation, like changing time signatures and stuff like that. But yeah, so that this idea that it was continually one, kind of about something else. It was about something
Composer.
else. It wasn't just about
Hmm.
getting from beginning to end. It was about something, and also.
Did you? Was it hard to come up with it? Was it hard to come up with, or you just like one day you were like, I want to highlight a composer and him, and sort of like started kind of brainstorming around which tune
I
to
think
get
probably
together.
ideas that
What
had
was the
been
thought process?
underneath the surface for many years, and all just kind of came out in a few months. Um, so, and then I think with that band, they kind of, what I was used to in Simon Fraser University was that we would play a bunch of music and maybe start a concert repertoire campaign, do the concert, and then say, hey, these tunes really worked. Let's put a medley together out of these tunes. This was the after working with Metro for a little while, where they kind of uh, preferred to have everything all on the table all at once. So the medley had to be complete, and so I had decided to just kind of go in that. Well, if I'm going to do that, it might as well be interesting to me as a composer. And I was actually doing my at the time I was doing my doctorate in composition at Yale. So like composing music was just like regular part of the day, and I also
Hmm.
wanted to see if I could assert some of those ideas in the pipe competition world, and seemed to be like Donald McLeod. That's the best common denominator that I won't get away with this unless it's Donald McLeod. So, and that way I can have
Sure.
P-Rock in the middle, and it's all new, and that kind of thing. And I think that, what was that? 2012 was when we debuted it. So we had just won the Worlds in 3B in 2011, and so there was a lot of enthusiasm in the band. It was a band, everyone was inspired, myself included, and thought that, like, hey, let's really take it up a notch, especially because we had targeted Maxville in 2012, and knew that
Right.
the Canadian Ontario scene would be a little bit more open-minded. We were likely to have some judges that would be appreciative of it, and we stuck with it for. We just stuck with it because it was a cool medley, and we used it at the Worlds when it was an MSR final. So we decided not to replace it, and not everybody liked it, but when we played it at the Pipes of Peace in 2013, I think a lot of people really appreciated it as a piece of music. Yeah,
Nice. That must have been a good satisfaction to. Yeah, it was a risk, like you were saying. It's a risk, and you took that risk, and got some pretty good feedback. But also, most importantly, probably is that people in the band are still talking about it, and
yeah,
it's one of their favorite. From still talking to most people in the band, it's still
yeah.
something that they remember. But also me, I remember I didn't know the band, and I was in Glasgow the year you guys did piping live, or played in George Square, and it was
Mm-hmm.
Spice of Life. The set, the music was
Yeah,
cool. The type of music that you guys will play as a band, where just like and it comes with you knowing you personally. It's like I want to play cool stuff. I don't care too much about is it going to be well judged. No, let's play the
yeah, yeah,
music I want to
yeah.
play. And I think that's you could sit as
Right,
a
right.
spectator at the
Yeah,
time. It was,
yeah. I
it's
think there
yeah.
was and the fun thing about uh, the other guys that had started the band, they had a little bit of that Australian influence, which was a little bit of some of that. Like we want to
Hmm.
play some cool contemporary music while putting on a good sound and throw some cool traditional hard stuff in there. And so um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you want to build like a whole obviously Donald McLeod was you're saying it was like can't go wrong with it. Did you ever think about why don't I just do it top to bottom, just my own composition, and I create something that ties everything together? I know Turnopolis did it a few years ago, where it felt like it was one massive piece together. Is it something that you thought about, or you're still
well, I
thinking
do I
about
do it in
doing?
my own music. The problem is the social
Right.
context, and no one ever let me do it in pipe band. And so the
Yeah.
Donald McLeod's about as far as people quite literally let me get away with. Um, as soon as the new medley ideas come up, the ideas almost always go. If I'm not doing it from beginning to end, the ideas always become more conservative. So, you know,
Hmm.
it's convinced people to do it. So one,
It's funny. There's an appetite for it. I feel like I talk to people and they're not complaining, but they're not saying like, I'd love to hear something a bit different, I mean, unique. But then once you pull the when it's the moment to pull the trigger, it's very
well,
difficult to. But you're saying that it's more convincing people, and also having the whole thing laid out as opposed to like a tune here and there. You're saying that showing the whole piece together has
yeah,
more
it shows
impact.
it has more impact. I mean, especially if you can tell people to do it, then people can't judge one way or the other. But what happened? I felt like when we moved up from grade 3B to grade 2 by the RSPBA, uh, we had nothing to lose. So um, then all of a sudden we won Maxville in our first year of grade 2. So, um, however, certain people, this is one reason why you should never share. If you're in leadership, you should never share the sheets with your band, because then they start to become critical of. They start buying into what the judges are saying or what. So, say that we have this great medley, but go to the Worlds next time, use that medley, and we almost didn't get through the qualifier because somebody didn't like the medley. However, we did, and we placed third overall in the Worlds that year in grade 2. So somebody can just not like the music and make a note of it, and then people that are, it's like, hey, why are we all in the band? Not everybody's in the band for the same reasons. Some people are there to compete. And when a band starts winning, people flock to it because they want to win. And that idea of winning is more important to people. So that's why it's hard to get the new music out there.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very valid point. And it's great to hear from a pipe major perspective as well. I've talked to different pipe major, Alex Gandy, for example, grade 1 band, and here you have experience with like grade 3A and grade 2 and doing good result. And it's like, things that sometimes even
Right.
as a drummer, you don't think about. You're like, not sharing the sheets. It's kind of funny.
That's my
But also having to get the buy-in from players that we might not
right,
make it, might not win it, but you're going
right,
to
right,
play a great piece of music.
right.
What are you here for, right? And it's you don't think about it. You imagine everyone is here to play good music or to win, but when you have to make a choice,
Yep.
that's when it becomes a
Mm-hmm.
little bit tricky and
Yep.
definitely harder. That's interesting. That's cool.
And
Thank you for sharing these thoughts.
it's
It's
fine. I
great
mean,
to hear.
people can like. That's why I chose other areas of music because I want to exercise certain other priorities. But when you're talking about brain space, like there's no other avenue in bagpiping to really learn the basics and to learn how to play the instruments properly other than the competition thing. It's just for me, I remember
Mhm.
reading Pipes and Drums. Well, it used to be Piper and Drummer a long time ago in the 90s, and Jim McGillivray, who had sort of retired from competitive playing. It's just like, what do you do in bagpipes after you win the best thing? Like in other music, like
Mhm.
that's just a stepping stone to like having a career. For us, it's like becomes what the career is all about. And if you get it, well, better go back and get it again. Uh, I, when I want to,
Yeah.
I think for me, winning a worlds in SFU at a very young age and at a very early point in my piping music career, I was lucky because I could kind of compartmentalize like, hey, that's a win. Let's try something else. You know, um,
That's a
so
very good point you're
I
bringing. Yeah.
like there are other things to do, and there are other things to do with this music to get it out there. And so I'm just more interested in who else is listening or wants to listen. So
Yeah, yeah, it's super interesting. You're raising a point that someone else raised in the shows, which was, you know, you got second and you've played extremely well and you're super happy with yourself. You didn't win because judges or result which happened, but sometimes you can win and then what's next? And you hear a lot of the time like, well, I
right,
want to win 20 in a row, or I want to win 20, but it never stop. I mean, you could play 50 years and try to win it, right? But you have a different perspective, which is, well, especially as a professional musician, if you say
mm-hmm.
I'm world champion, which is massive, and anything that you do, you could be in sport, you're world
Right,
champion
right,
in basketball, that's massive. But you're world champion in piping,
right,
that's
right,
also a massive achievement. You're competing against thousands of people, but yet it
right.
doesn't give you that much, and so that's why you start exploring all the stuff
Well,
outside, but still with
we have to
piping.
determine like what it can give you. And I think that the New York Metro was a little smart about this. Like, hey, it's like who cares if we're in the lowest grade? Normally, people are like want to be in the highest grade as possible in the quickest amount of time, winning the least amount of stuff. Um, there was something smart about just hey, we'll go, whatever. Let's go win. Let's go win the lowest grade. And there's well, think about the
And
promotional
progress.
value of it. What? Why do other sports when they win the world championship or the like World Series or whatever, their product is boosted. it's all about it, it's all a promotion. I mean, that's sorry, that was such a New York way of thinking of it, but I,
I
yeah,
was just going to say it's a
I
very
was
New York
jaded
thing.
by New York. So, but I thought about it like I actually thought about it as a musician, like very early on, like, hey, well, I have a world championship in this. Why not use that as part of my musician bio? Like so and so says they went to Juilliard. Well, there's no Juilliard for bagpipes. Well, okay. Well, I got to, you know, played the world championship, and it's just something and you start to list. You create your own biography as a musician, and that's kind of necessary because, um, you are your art to a certain degree, and you have to sell what you've done. So having a world
Yeah.
championship for me was a huge boost in the regular music world. People are like, well, oh,
Right. It helps you kind of navigate outside of like pipe band. Not that you
not
were like, I'm done with pipe band, but you were like, wow, I've done it. It's super exciting, and
exactly.
maybe I can look at
I
into
thought of it as
touring
like,
all this
hey,
stuff.
yes, the sky's the limit. Like, what can I do? Who can I, like, well, can I work with Philip Glass? That was my dream. Like, can I do that? So, and
Right.
so
Super interesting. Yeah. So
yeah,
and I want to be
okay,
mindful of the time. We're 45 minutes in, but what's what you're up to now? So you're in California. I know you published
yes,
a book recently. I'd love
a new.
for you to tell us more about it.
That's it. You'll see you recognize
Nice.
a younger version of myself on there. Um, a new complete theory for the Highland bagpipe. It is modeled on the first written text of the bagpipe, the Joseph MacDonald Complete Theory, which was written in 1760 and was published in 1803. Most of the modern bagpipe settings, or all of them throughout the 1800s, were influenced by this book. And it was written from the perspective of a classically trained musician who was also a well-trained piper. So that became that became me in a lot
Kind
of
of you,
ways.
but
I
years
thought
ago.
like, oh well, how can I document the bagpipe um, today? And this was my Yale doctoral
Hmm.
dissertation in one way. So I wrote this while I was doing that degree, and I put a lot of effort into it, and it kind of reflected a lifetime of work in a lot of ways. I still have more of the years, but my then lifetime, and it won the prize at Yale for the best dissertation. They were very impressed. They were like,
Very
this
cool.
is like, yep, this is a lifetime of work, and it's publish ready. And I decided to self publish it during the pandemic. So when I included in that a an appendix, a very large appendix, like a third of the book is notated music of mine. Um, in the tradition, like that could be played by a solo bagpipe or a pipe band. Um,
And it's available online.
yeah,
Like I'll put your website and stuff
it's
in
available
the
at
link,
my
but it's available online.
Bandcamp site, which is where the sort of home for my record label, kotekonrecords.com. That's where you can get the hard copy book and download a PDF and get also an album to come with it. It's also there's like an ebook version that's out there too, just like a PDF on if you want to just download that. But yeah, there's music in there.
Hmm.
There's 13 P-Bricks of mine, which I think is for me is not a lot of people publish that, so that's not all of them. But I thought like publishing at least the same amount of tunes that are in a P-Brick Society volume that I could at least compete with that.
Hmm.
And P-Brick is probably my longest standing love of the bagpipe for the bagpipe. That is my favorite music,
Really?
and
Hmm.
it inspired me the most to think big about the structure, about the music, about the sound, you know, the the way of listening. Um, you know, it's the only
Interesting.
bagpipe music that goes through
Cool.
different tempo changes and stuff like that. That is in the tradition. So So I have a bunch of pibroch that are like, that are really, I have one that's like a choose your own adventure one. So it starts with the ground, and you can choose different variations, and so there are many, many possibilities. And there are other ones that are like appropriate for beginners, and some that are only should be reserved for the Glenfiddich 100 years from now. So anyway,
I love it. I love it. For those listening, and they probably grasp your just who you are as a person, as a musician. I feel like it matches that the book represent. And all those ideas that you just shared that are in the book represent sort of who you are as a
right.
musician. Experimenting around stuff, and so highly recommend. Not drummers like me, but pipers
Well,
to get a
even
copy of it.
drummers.
Great.
I think what I write when I'm writing about what I write about in terms of the traditional music, I think the drummers could digest quite well, because I'm thinking of it in terms of phrases and structures, and I write about the traditional music from a slightly different perspective, and where it seemed just a little bit more objective about it. Um, and the weird stuff that I write about, I think drummers would dig, because it kind of gets into different types of rhythms and stuff. But anyway, uh, it's
Nice.
for everyone,
Yeah. I
and
mean, it's for
only
everyone.
the
It's for
most
everyone.
elite
But yeah,
specialist.
yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm. It's don't be
Yeah.
afraid of the book. It's not all technical.
Of the book.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, I'll
Sweet.
put a link in the. Yeah. I'll put a link in the on the website. But anything else you want to promote?
Um,
Before we wrap
Well,
up,
yeah,
that
I guess
apart
what
from the
am I
book.
doing? I'm doing a lot of opera these days, and so if anybody is interested in seeing how that works, I have a lot of stuff going on parallel to the piping, all the piping stuff that I'm doing, experimental, traditional, whatnot. So I love the operatic voice,
Nice.
and so if anybody's curious to see like what goes, how do I think outside of the, even further away from the bagpipe. There's a lot of classical music that I do, and have a listen. You might hear the bagpipes secretly somewhere inside that. So
Nice. Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much for jumping in. I know we have known each other for a few years now. When I moved to New York, and we played in the same band, but it was great to, especially like I talked to you before, but it's like I we have
mhm.
guests that are pure pipe band people, and the guests that are purely
Right.
folks music, and sort of with guitar and stuff, and trying to represent every sort of style. And your style is very unique, so I was excited to talk to you, because it's not just guitar and a piper. It's a piper with a bass and a drum, but also this orchestra sort of like a
Well,
touch that you add to your pieces.
yeah,
So
I
very,
appreciate it.
I'm glad
Thanks so
we got
much.
to catch up.
I won't rattle too long, but because we did just play at Piping Live, it wasn't just my band, Blarvuster. There was also Malin Makes Music, and it was presented under the idea of this Kjell Nua, this idea of new music that reflects on the tradition, but also is really open to like personal freedom. I think that there's a lot. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Pipers and drummers will start to see a lot more of this type of music coming out, because the National Piping Center has a lot of new young direction and a lot of adventurous faculty, open-minded faculty there now, that are encouraging people to, learn their basics but be very creative. So I think thanks for covering this area. I think that there will be more people in the future that will follow this type of in between area. So yeah.